Well, hello everyone. My name is Rick DeYoung. I am the Artist and Educator Relations Manager here at KHS America, and we welcome you to our fourth event in a series of 7. Tonight's event and clinic titled How to Effectively Communicate with Your Administrator. If you are first joining us for this event, just want to let you know that within an hour at the conclusion of the event, you should get an email with your certificate for your professional development. And if you don't, please email us so that we can make sure that you do receive that. Also want to let you know that there's a chat section on the right-hand side, and we encourage you to get engaged, not only there for the panelists, but also with the other attendees that are in attendance. And if you have a question, go ahead and click on the question area so that we can see it and make sure that we can get all your questions answered. And then at the conclusion of this event, I will come back on stage to let you know about the event that we are doing next week. So for tonight, we have the following event.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Bo, it's good to see you. Welcome.
Good to see you too, Brian. Thanks for including me in this conversation.
Hey, happy to have you here tonight. Happy to have everyone here tonight. I think it's going to be a really fun night of collaborating together. So tonight we're here to talk about how to effectively communicate with your administrator. Let's do a little bit of introductions here so we can get to know each other a bit. My name is Brian Duffy. I was a K-12 music educator for about 20 years. I'm from Minnesota, originally from Rosemount, Minnesota, where Bo teaches currently. I was a music educator teaching mostly high school band, but also taught some elementary music and some middle school band as well. Then I was also a music artist. I've been an artist for KHS for quite a while, a percussionist, playing lots of marimbas, my favorite instrument. And then the last 4 years, I started getting into school administration. So I'm currently an assistant principal at Dayton Elementary School in the Anoka School District in Minnesota, which is the largest district in our states. And the things that I value is I value moral leadership. I think it's important we all do the right and the just for kids. I value compassion because to me, compassion is putting that empathy into action. Courage. I think it's important to be courageous as educators. Curiosity. I love looking at old things in new ways. Integrity. I think that's where trust comes from, is when we operate with integrity. I love interdependence, which is why I'm so excited about tonight to be interconnected with not just Bo, but everyone here on stage so we can learn from one another. And then empowerment, empowering people, which is more, in my mind, more powerful than engagement, because when you're empowered, you can do things independently. And I'm going to let Bo introduce himself. And let me also say, you can see my family there, married, 2 boys, a second grader and a kindergartner. They keep me busy, and I learn from them each and every day of my life.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. My name's Bojan Hoover. I've been a high school band director for the last 11 years in Rosemount, Minnesota. It's in District 196, southern suburb of the Twin Cities area. And so happy to be here with you all tonight. I'm a percussion artist. I've been with KHS, I think, since 2013. And I'm also the executive director of River City Rhythm. It's a youth nonprofit organization here in the Twin Cities. We have a DCI drum and bugle corps, a winter drum line, winter color guard. So I wear, like many of you, many different hats. I received my music education degree and music performance degree from the University of Minnesota. I actually got my master's degree over in Ireland, studied abroad over there for a little bit, and I'm currently enrolled at the University of St. Thomas in a doctoral program for educational leadership and learning with a concentration in music education. I'm by no means feel like an expert on this subject, and I hope you can learn from my mistakes as well as you learn from my successes, and I'll try to share some of those stories with you tonight. I value community, creativity, collaboration, excellence, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Awesome. And so one of the reasons we talk about what we value here tonight is, as we talk about communicating effectively with our administrators, values and beliefs plays a huge role in that. And I think it's important for you to know what is it that you value as an educator, and what your administrators value. What is your school value? Oftentimes when we have frustration in communication with our administrators, it's those values that are creating some dissonance. They're rubbing up against each other, and our values aren't the same. So it's important to know what our values are. I ask you, and I wonder now, do you know what the values are of your administrators? What do they value as administrators? What do you value? And I think knowing those things can really be one of the key pieces in engendering great communication with our administrators. So tonight, we want to talk about what our goal is. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Simon Sinek and his idea of the golden circle. He always talks about start with your why. So we have a big goal here tonight with a lot of words. It's important that I think I don't just read all the words because that's not really good presenting, but take a moment and read through it. The bolded words are the ones that really stick out in this. Our why is that we all value arts education. That's why we're here on a Thursday night. You worked, you did a lot of great things for kids, and yet you're still taking time to meet tonight to learn and grow even more because we value arts education. That's our why. Our how, that Simon talks about, is how do we do what we do? Well, we promote arts education by developing and nurturing effective channels of communication with our administrators. And the what, that's the strategies and skills. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. What are the strategies and skills we can use to engender great communication with our administrators so that we can promote arts education for our students, so that we can have conversations with our administrators that foster student-centered decision-making. And that's really at the heart of what we're doing here tonight. So a couple of things about tonight. I always like to think about shared assumptions, things that we as a group share together in terms of how we're approaching this tonight. And in my mind, we're approaching this informally. We're all working together. I believe very much that the smartest person in the room, our room tonight, is all of us together. It's important we use each other as resources. We have this great chat, use it, collaborate together. If you're collaborating together on the chat and you're not listening to Bo or I, that's great. The important thing is that we collaborate together and learn from one another. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn from Bo and also what I'm going to learn from all the people in the chat tonight. There's important work ahead for arts education. There always is. But our COVID realities, to me, suggest that our interdependence as music educators working together is more important than ever. So that's my mindset tonight, is let's work together so we can become even better advocates for arts education. Bo, any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, obviously it's such a tenuous time in arts education, arts in general, because of the pandemic. And so kudos to KHS for putting together this important topic and discussion for tonight. I think just learning how to communicate, learning and knowing the best route to communicate with your administrators and your colleagues in general will help us get through this together and hopefully come back as strong, if not stronger than before.
Absolutely. So as we go tonight, if you have questions, something you want to talk about, we're happy to do that. Put that in the chat. We will happily pause what we're doing here and dig in. It's not about getting through the PowerPoint tonight. It's about us working together and collaborating. So if you have scenarios you want to talk through with Bo and I and everyone on the chat, let's do it. Put it out there. Put a problem you might be having, a question you might be having, because you'll get answers not just from Bo and myself, but everyone who's on here who might have great ideas for you. And let's see if I can go to the next slide. Boop. Cool. So this quote is a quote that I love. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place, from Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw. And I think that's one of the key pieces here is, as we explore communication with our administrator tonight, is sometimes this illusion that it has taken place when actually it hasn't. We might believe we have, but the person on the receiving end doesn't, or vice versa. I can think of a time when I went in to talk to my administrator when I was a band director, and I went on in and spoke with her, and it was about a staffing issue, and I said, just popped my head in the door and said, so the staffing that came out yesterday, that's what we're doing? And she said, yep. And that was the end of the discussion. My intent was to start a larger conversation, but I didn't present that well. I asked her a question, she answered, and that was done. I thought we were having a larger communication, and we really weren't, because I didn't present it that way. I didn't communicate really effectively with her to have a problem-solving conversation at that moment. Bo, how about yourself? Have you got examples of this?
Yeah, Brian, I love this quote. I think back at my experiences here at Rosemount High School, and anytime there's ever been any tension, any disagreement, it's always been because there's been a lack of communication, not being proactive enough with your administrators or your colleagues and just giving them the heads up that something might be coming their way. For instance, an upset parent or an upset student, or not giving them, enough foresight into what you were thinking or planning. just for instance, hopefully my administrators aren't on this right now, but I work as a team with a team of other band directors, and we recently started thinking about how we can perhaps create some exciting momentum going into next year. So we started planning a trip over spring break in 2022. And we started making some announcements to students and to families. We were pretty excited about this. We had started talking with a tour agency, but we forgot the key ingredient of getting our administrators on board and getting their blessing and going through those proper channels, which is, a facepalm moment. And so there was a little bit of a friction, a little bit of tension right then and there. So we, have to go back and, of course, include them, wrap them into the discussion, and make sure everything's clear on their end as well. So I love that quote, and I couldn't agree with it more, Brian.
Yeah, Bo, we have a question here from James Rogers in Alabama. He says, many administrators are coaches, while very few are former musicians. Do you have any suggestions for handling this?
Yes, that's a great question. All but one of our administrators right now at Rosemount High School are coaches, football coaches primarily, right? And I have my current principal and my former principal too would often say things like, I don't have a musical bone in my body. And to me, I always kind of just slump in my chair whenever I hear that type of language, because first of all, I know he did music in high school. And I think they're trying to be humble when they say things like that. But I think it comes from a place of just not understanding what you do. They don't know how to evaluate it. They don't know how to assess it. They don't know how to appreciate it in the same way they might, be able to look at a core class and look at test scores, for example. So one thing that I've really tried to do this year is just invite my administrators into my classroom. And that's been easy when we're in distant learning. It's just a Zoom link away. For instance, this past winter, I had put a lot of effort into having alumni come back and talk about their experiences in high school, specifically people who are pursuing music. And we had this great conversation with the hip hop artist here in the Twin Cities who graduated from Rosemount. And I invited both my administrators into the conversation, into the Zoom link, just to be observers. And they were absolutely blown away by what we were doing. And the conversation went really well. So just taking those opportunities to not just invite them to the concert, not inviting them to see the product, but to see the process, which we all know is equally, if not more important than the end. So that would be my number one recommendation, is just you kind of have to train them, so to speak. You have to help them. You have to open the doors for them so that they can see inside of your classroom and inside of your curriculum a little bit better, so that they can understand it.
Yeah, that's a great response. I agree. And I know one of my mentors in life is a man named John Green, a great band director at Rosemount High School, actually, and taught me. And one of the things I always talked about when working with administrators was this idea of educating them. They're learning too. I'm an administrator, but I don't have all the answers. I'm learning. I taught high school most of my career, and I'm an elementary school principal. If somebody to tell me what are all the nuts and bolts of reading, I don't have all those skills. So I'm constantly learning. I want to learn. I appreciate it when that educator is teaching me about things that I know I don't know about. So it's finding those times and those moments. And I think coming into the classroom is a huge one. I also think inviting them to PLCs. I'm not sure how your PL structure works, but that's a good chance for them to hear about how you talk about music and education and how you talk about kids. Because any administrator, when you start talking about kids and student-centered, they start listening more closely. Tell me more about the kids here, the kids that we serve. And then in those moments when you're having conversations, you have to determine, what does this administrator really need to know to understand this conversation in the moment? What are some key pieces they need to know to follow what I'm presenting here? So have that set ahead of time. Maybe it's something specifically about instruments. I've had to have conversations about repair budgets. So I've had to really explain how instrument repair works, so my administrators, when I was a band director, could understand why I needed the budget I did. So it's just knowing what are the right amounts to get them that education. And the other piece too is the more you get to know them, we're going to talk about different reasons we communicate, but the more you get to know them, you can find ways to link that. Research shows that you learn by linking things to things that are personal to you. We know that for kids, when we can get a topic and they can link it to something personal connection they already have, that connection grows stronger to the new thing. So if you can connect to them, what if they are a football coach? What are the similarities to how we teach music to athletics? And what are those similarities, and how can I help them make connections to music so they can see it from their personal lens? So I think that's an important piece as well.
Yeah, I love that, Brian. I think knowing how your administrator or colleague interacts, interprets information. I had a former principal who was very data-driven, and so the emotional argument necessarily wasn't resonating with that person, which makes sense. It wasn't until in a staffing sectioning meeting we reached out to all the other high schools in our district and looked at enrollment numbers, looked at staffing decisions, and broke it down with just numbers and said, if we have the staffing that we have next year, we're going to offer 2 or 3 fewer lessons per trimester for our students compared to the other high schools in our district. So that was an equity issue, of course. But sometimes just using the numbers, if your administrator likes that type of information, it's important to know, and it's important to use those numbers to better your argument or your position.
Yeah, that's the piece. Knowing your administrator, again, what do they value, but also that type coach. If you've never done type coach, it's that thing of, we all have different personality types. Check that out. It's a good way to know how your administrators communicate. I see a question from a good friend of mine, Ray Vasquez. Oh my goodness. Phenomenal trumpet player. If you don't know Ray Vasquez, oh my goodness, just amazing. I had him out as a guest artist at one of my jazz band concerts out about a decade ago. Just amazing. He's got a good question here about, it says, my current principal is retiring. She's been a great supporter of the fine arts on my campus, especially band. How can I try to establish this level of support from a new principal? So that idea of how does he develop new rapport and new trust with the principal that's he hasn't met yet.
Yeah, we just had a transition here at Rosemount High School, Ray, and we tried our best to be involved in the decision-making process, being on the committee that helped us find a new principal, and just having a voice in the room is certainly helpful. But it is a little bit of a starting over. It feels like sometimes trying to rebuild the rapport, rebuild the trust, rebuild the relationship that may have been really positive.
Yeah, and here's what we do. Ray, we're going to go on to some points in here that I think are going to cover some of this, and then we'll come back around specifically to it. But let me get to some of these points that I think might help answer the question you have, because it's a great one. How do we build rapport with a new administrator? That's really at the heart of a lot of this. So we're going to talk a bit about communication in general, and then we'll dig in more to music-specific things. So the first piece is why do we communicate? There are really 4 reasons why we communicate in a professional setting. The first one is that exchange of information. That idea that I'm trying to get some information across to you. And sometimes it's factual stuff, but sometimes it's also just emotional, feeling stuff. I want you to know how I feel about this decision. I want you to know what I think about this decision, right? Feelings and thinking is 2 different things, but that exchange of information. That happens a lot in the work we do. The second one, gain new skills, form new knowledge. To me, knowledge is really just putting information into productive use. That normally looks like skills, right? So tonight, it's a chance for all of us to gain new skills, form new knowledge. It's a form of communication we're doing right now. So we all have some new skills and knowledge that we can bring forward. The third one's the one we do a lot, and the one that's probably at the heart of a lot of our thoughts, I think, tonight as we have this conversation. It's about problem solving. There's something that's come up. We have some problem or some perceived problem, something we see might be coming down the road or something in the moment, and we're wondering how we're going to solve this problem. And the trick there can sometimes be that you might see a problem that yet your administrator does not necessarily see as a problem. So how do we get to that? And I want to say an important piece, something I've learned a lot about, is the difference between exchange of information and problem solving. I can tell you how an administrator, how I feel about a decision they made and what I think about a decision they made, but that doesn't mean we problem solved. I've been in a situation where I've gone in and I've just told my administrator, here's what I think, here's what I feel about your decision. And then that's it. That's not problem solving. There's steps to go to start working on how do we actually problem solve the situation, and we'll dig in more detail on that. And the fourth one reason we communicate is social and make connections. Like tonight, we're trying to make connections with new people across the USA and abroad, it looks like. So we're trying to make connections in social, and we do that at work too. And that is an important piece with your administrator, making those connections and getting to know each other, getting to see each other as humans. There's a guy named Joe Beckman. Go Google him. He's a great human connector. He works here in Minnesota, and he works on connecting people together. He came into our staff and did just an amazing job connecting us as a staff. He's phenomenal with students. Just an amazing presenter, Joe Beckman. Go check him out and see if you can get him in. And during this time where we're doing lots of different Google Meets and Zooms, I think it'd be pretty amazing. Just a great guy to connect. So those are the 4 reasons why we communicate as educators. So now we're going to oh, go ahead, Bo.
Sorry. And I would say all this is great for colleagues too. Brian, you're mentioning type coach. I'm an INTP. It takes me forever to process information. I process it internally. I really think about what I'm going to say before I say it. I had a colleague my first few years who was the direct opposite, just constantly processing out loud, wanted to know what I was thinking in the moment. And it was at some points kind of a tense relationship because of that. So we have to learn how to communicate with each other and respect that our ways of communicating can be different. Absolutely.
Great point. So what we have here is steps for effective communication. We've outlined six steps to it. It might feel prescriptive and maybe a little too methodical. So it's okay to balance this with an organic style. I think for me, there are times where it's more organic. I feel comfortable in some of the skills and I feel good about not necessarily going prescriptive. But I can also say there's lots of times I follow this list myself. And so we're going to provide for you some checklists basically as we go on here of things to do. And sometimes when I'm communicating really important things that feel heavy, and during the time of COVID, we've been doing that a lot. There's a lot of really important communications going out. My principal and I, we spend a lot of time going through a checklist like this and really working together to make sure the communication we're putting out is exactly what we want to put out, that our interactions we're having with people are the types we want to have, that we're presenting ourselves in the way we want to be seen. And that's a key point because many times how we present ourselves is not necessarily how we're seen. So we have to really work on that. So the 6 pieces, I'll go through them quickly before we dive in more. Am I emotionally ready to communicate? We don't talk enough about emotions in the education field. And the truth is emotions play a big role in the work we do. And we need to understand our emotions so we can use them constructively. Have I considered the topic fully? Is this communication really needed? And then what's my purpose again in communicating? Why am I initiating this communication? Third, channels of communication. We'll talk more about the low richness and high richness channels of communication and how we choose to use different ones based on the situation. The preparation of our communication. And this is a huge step, the step 4, really digging into how we prepare that communication, whether it's an in-person, whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call, whatever it may be. And then next steps. Am I prepared for the next steps based on this initial communication? And then the last one, closure and non-closure. Too often we don't think enough about what will the closure to this communication look like? How will I know when this communication on this topic has ended? And how will I feel about that? And what would non-closure look like? Because we know we don't always get closure. What does non-closure look like? And what are those expectations with my administrator? How does my administrator see the closure and the non-closure? So,
Brian, yeah. I was reflecting with my colleagues earlier this week about the difference between one of our arts administrators now compared to our arts administrators a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And the administrator a few years ago, extrovert, would constantly just show up in our room or our office just to talk. And it was very informal. And our new administrator is more of an introvert and of course didn't have a relationship set up with him. And so we realized we have not been meeting or communicating with this new principal 1/10 of the amount that we had been communicating informally with this old administrator. And so we realized that, and we just decided to schedule a meeting with this new administrator once every other week, without any specific agenda in mind, but just being able to, be more planful because their style of communication was different. and I think having those meetings set up throughout the year will help us be more proactive, and the conversations that we have won't always necessarily be tense or come from a negative position, because we're always just trying to communicate and be more proactive when things.
Yeah, I love the idea, the idea of being proactive. We know there are lots of things that come up, so let's plan ahead some meetings so we can have these communications and see what comes of them. You know, there's a thing that talks about when you're working with students, this 5-to-1 ratio. So you want 5 positives for every interaction that maybe isn't positive, that might have a negative feel to it for the other person. And I think that's important too, sometimes how we interact with adults and other people. Are we embedding some positive interactions as well? If the only time we're going to administrators when there might be some problems, that can be challenging. We want to have those moments of positive interactions, those pieces of, hey, thanks so much for coming to the band concert last night. I really appreciate it. It's great to have you there. I appreciate the things you said to start off my concerts. Those types of things. So I always think about that 5-to-1. Are we embedding some positive relationships with my administrator?
Yeah, that's great. And oftentimes parents will send us positive reinforcements too. Mm-hmm. And we need to encourage those parents to forward that on to your administrator, because I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm sure you get an inbox full of maybe not so nice or negative emails.
They happen, yeah.
Yep. And so I'm sure you appreciate when you get a positive one coming your way, and they're probably few and far between for administrators. So I love that idea of positivity and making sure, you're getting a good positive to not so positive ratio.
It does. It's good. And honestly, sometimes when I get those positive ones, it really helps me see the forest through the trees sometimes. You know, it helps me to start to see the larger picture sometimes. You go, oh yeah, there's a lot of really good going on. It's good to have those reminders. So let's dig into some of these steps. And again, keep the questions coming, or chat, communicate with each other. If you have scenarios, we'd love to hear them. So the first one we talked about is emotions. And I say this because we need to know our emotions. There's a great book by a coach named Elena Aguilar. She works a lot in equity coaching, coaching teams. She has a book called Onward. I suggest every educator read this book. It talks about building emotional resilience as an educator. I would highly encourage you to go check out that book on Amazon or wherever you like to get books and read the book. It really talks about how we deal with emotions, and it's essential for us to understand our emotions. So sometimes things happen in our daily work, and our emotions shift and change. Too often, and I think the professional field, we say, well, don't have emotions. That's not true. You can't have emotions. That's impossible. We all have emotions. It's how we deal with our emotions and turn them into, use them in productive ways. That's the key. So when you're having something's coming up that's feeling really strong, an administrator's made a decision that you don't agree with, staffing decisions come out, budget decisions come out, these types of things that tend to be high stakes, scheduling, really take the time to see where you're at emotionally in the moment. Before you initiate that communication, where are my emotions? What are they and where do they fit? If you're not familiar with the zones of regulation, check them out. We use them with students, but I can tell you, I use them with myself a lot. I check my own zone of where am I in the moment? And we want to be in the green zone, a good place to communicate. And what I like to tell my students, and when I tell myself a lot, I tell my own children, I tell me as I work, is I hit the pause button when I'm feeling strong emotions, and I don't communicate until I'm ready to communicate in a way that's going to help the situation. I know there's examples as when I was an educator, when I communicated too quickly. I wasn't ready emotionally to have this discussion because I was angry, and I was communicating from a place of anger, and that it wasn't productive. Might have felt good in the moment, but it didn't really get me to where I want to go. It hurt the situation. It did not help it, because all the administrator focused on was my poor communication instead of the topic, the student-centered topic that we really want to get to.
Yeah, and so often when I write an email that might have some tension involved with it, leave it in the draft folder for a little bit, reread it in the morning, have your spouse, partner read it, and make sure it comes across the way that you're really intending it to come across.
Yeah, and we do that here. I do it with my administrator, and I encourage you to do it too. Communicate with your team or with those you trust as you're developing a communication plan. Have others look through it, or if you're going to have a conversation, say, here's what I'm thinking of doing, talk through it. It helps a lot. So that's step one, just making sure you're in the right emotional place to have communications. And now we're getting to this checklist piece, and I encourage you to think of this as a checklist. And that is, have I fully considered the situation before I begin communicating about whatever it is, whether it's a problem-solving thing, whether it's an exchange of information, whatever it is, really think through and fully consider the situation. Some things I ask myself just about every time before I send out an email to my staff, a parent, before I pick up that phone and make a call to a parent who might be upset about something, I ask myself, what's my purpose in this communication? Is there really a need to communicate? Sometimes I find I really don't need to. I'm feeling it because I might be having an emotion that says I really need to say this, but actually it's not going to help. Maybe I really don't need to communicate on this. One thing I think it's really good, if you're responding to a communication or a decision from an administrator and you're wondering about it, take the time to ask yourself, what are 3 reasons why this person may have made the decision they did? So I always try to say, okay, if a teacher made a certain decision, okay, why are 3 reasons why they might have made this decision? When I go and observe a classroom, or I'm walking by and see what's going on in their classroom, and I go, maybe I don't agree with the decision that teacher made in the moment. What are 3 reasons why they made that decision in the moment? And I always keep a 4th open. And that 4th is, it's some reason I just don't know. I don't have enough information to know why. And that really helps me fully consider the situation before I engage in the topic. And I just think that's really essential. It builds that positive intent, that idea of positive intent with the person I'm going to communicate with. Another thing I think about is, what have I done to problem solve this already? That piece between, am I thinking about solutions? I value when a teacher comes to me and says, I'm feeling this, I'm thinking this about this situation, and I have some ideas. You have my attention when you say, I have thoughts and ideas. I have some solutions in mind. Can we talk about these and discuss these and brainstorm? I will always say yes to that. When you come to me with ideas and you want to solve something, I'll always say yes. I think back to when I was a band director at Rosemount High School, about 20 years ago, we were going through budget cuts. And our leadership at that time was a very young teacher. And the leadership there, John Green and some other great leaders in that district, there were big budget cuts coming district-wide. And what they did is they communicated to administrators about what they're thinking about those budget cuts, and then they had solutions in mind. What if we did this? If we did the cuts this way, we can better serve our students. Instead of cutting 5th grade band, we'd rather see the FTE, so the ratio, go up, take a few down from our secondary, and keep 5th grade band. And here's how we think we could do that. That impressed the administrators. They were right on board and said, wow, we love that you have solutions. We love that you recognize that we are making some cuts, but you found the most effective way to serve students. They were right on board with that. So when we come in with problem solving already, you've got the administrator's attention. And then think about, what systems do your school or district use to communicate? If you're one that says, well, we prefer you go to your department leader, who will then go to the specific administrator in charge, then you should really follow that process. There are some administrators who like that kind of top-down method, that they work in that way. Yours might be that way, or it might not, but it's important to know how your administration prefers to communicate, and just having some understanding of that. And then the last 2 pieces I like to think about before I go and present my problem or something that I'm concerned about to an administrator is, my problem would be solved if. So I ask myself, okay, in this situation, my problem would be solved if ... And then I try and think about that. And it's a good way to problem solve. And this last one we put in, this idea is the concern I have, is it a student-centered one, or is it really a personal one? And I say that both are important, right? Students' concern, of course, and your personal concerns are important too. But you need to understand that, know which area you're coming from. And one thing I like to think about as we work as educators, there's a truth, and sometimes it's not one we always want to hear, but kids come first. Kids are number one. Kids are always come first, because that's why we're here. I'm sitting at my school tonight, and this school was built for kids. It wasn't built for me. I'm a steward of this. But none of this is mine. This isn't my office. This belongs to the people, and it's here for kids. And adults come second. Now, in times of COVID, that might sound weird. In times of COVID, we all come first in terms of health and safety, of course. But in terms of generally speaking, students come first, adults come second, to know that. And if you're going to your administrator about a personal concern, that's valid and that matters. But just know you might actually be talking more about an HR type piece. And I think the larger piece is really focus on student-centered conversations. Focus it on what do kids do, right? It's not about my FTE loss, about what that FTE loss will mean for our students. That gets the attention of the administrator more. Bo, any thoughts to share on that? And I see some great comments here from some folks in the chat as well.
That's great. In addition to not making it about yourself, I think sometimes we get wrapped up into our program and the ego of our program and the legacy of our program, so to speak. And I agree, Brian, we do need to keep it student-centered. How are these decisions affecting the students here and now? Using that language certainly is much more powerful and important.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit then about channels of communication. This is important to know. There's a thing called low channel richness and high channel richness. Neither is bad. They're just different for the moment. So a low channel richness could be something like if you put out a newsletter. I have teachers here who put out Peek at the Week. They put them out every Friday so the families can see them. And it's a newsletter that goes out to family. Low channel richness are things that are generally one direction. You put it out, a group of people, usually a larger group of people, receive that information. And that's the extent of the communication. It goes one direction to a large number of people. High channel richness is where it's more of interaction. You can see here they label that as face-to-face conversations. In the world we live in now, it means a lot more video conferencing. But the idea that it's a back and forth, an exchange of ideas, like tonight, right? If we just put this out and just sent you the PowerPoint, that's a different feeling than the discussion we're having here tonight and on the chat and in the questions and all those types of things. But the advantage is you get the dialogue. The disadvantage of high channel richness sometimes is the number of people you can communicate with. And so the important takeaway here is, as you can initiate this communication, what is the best channel for you to use for this situation, for this reason that we're communicating. So I have this purpose for communicating, what's the best way to do it? I think an important thing to note, I circle those, the two we use the most are email and face-to-face. My advice is to use email very wisely. And if you start finding yourself having to really think about the words you're typing in the email, it probably is suggesting to you should have a face-to-face conversation. If you're finding like, oh, I wonder if that could be interpreted wrong, I have to think about the word, that word doesn't feel right, then you know you're really looking at a face-to-face conversation. Emails should not be something that need to be interpreted. If you have an email that goes, wow, this could be interpreted in lots of ways, take that email, use it as a template for your communication, great. But then go set up a meeting, a face-to-face. I tell my teachers often, if you have to make a difficult phone call home, one you think might be challenging, write it out, type it up, and then print it off, but don't send that email. Use that email as your form of communication and then pick up the phone and call. So that channels we choose are just super important and really determine the effectiveness of a conversation we have. Bo, anything you want to share?
I've found myself using the phone way more this year. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that way.
Nope.
Just the incessant use of email, the constant filling of inboxes in this digital age, and especially during the pandemic. I feel like a phone call is so much more personal. It goes so much further with students, parents, with colleagues, administrators. So I agree, Brian. Ray asked a question which may pertain to this a little bit too. He asked, what do you do if your administrator loses their composure during a conversation? Is the topic dead, or is it worth revisiting at a later time? And would you use a different medium? That would be my question. I don't know.
Yeah, Ray, great question. Here's my thoughts. There's some tips later on here talking about how do you keep your composure as you're in those challenging conversations, right? So planning ahead from your end as if we start getting some tension or some conflict in that conversation. And the other piece is in monitoring your administrator. Hopefully you have an administrator who has strong emotional intelligence and can monitor their emotions in the moment, and is someone who can keep their composure. because that's important. We're professionals. We're in a professional job here. We should all maintain professionalism as we work. We should have that ability to maintain our composure. If you have an administrator who's failing to do that, I think it's okay to pause that conversation, hit the pause button and say, might it be best if we pause this conversation, give ourselves some time to consider this and reschedule this for next time? And you bring up that piece, Ray, you know, is the topic dead because they got upset? And that's an important thing sometimes to ask administrators is, can we revisit this again? We might be struggling right now, or you might be saying, at this time, my answer is final, here's my decision. It's good in those moments when you get a stop sign, like we're done here, to say, would it be okay if I brought this topic up again 3 months from now, next year at this time, as we talk about staffing, a couple weeks from now, after we let your decision, I'm going to fully support your decision, do my very best. Can we approach this discussion, this topic again 2 weeks from now to see how it's going? And so having that honest thing, so both of you understand closure in that moment, that yes, you can come back and have this topic again, or no, we're done with this topic. The other part I'd say, Ray, is if you have an administrator who persistently loses their composure, right? They probably have different values than you. And that's something you have to be on the lookout for. We talked about values at the beginning. If you're in conversations with someone and their values are in alignment with yours, and I can tell you if I'm working with someone who constantly loses their composure and is getting angry, our values definitely don't align. And if I'm out of alignment with an administrator, I have to ask myself, will this change? Can it change? And the reality is you have to care about yourself enough and your profession to say, if it can't, if this isn't going to change, and this is the values here at this school, and I cannot change them, you have to ask yourself if it's time to go and move on. And that's a fair thing to ask yourself. And if you're looking for more on that, read Onward by Elena Aguilar. She talks about it more and gives some really great tips for educators when you're encountering that with administrators. And if there's any admin on the line, she also gives tips to administrators as well. So those are some of my thoughts there. Let's keep moving. I can see it's 6:40 and I'm just really enjoying the discussion here, but I want to honor everyone's time as well. So this next one, this is the step where we actually start crafting our communication. And again, it's a long checklist. There is so much in here. But these are things I know I think about when I'm communicating. And I'll just go and get through some of these ones I think are the most important, and both jump in when you have some thoughts as well. Biggest one, the length of my communication. I was once met with a teacher who had 28 agenda items for a 30-minute meeting. It was 3 pages long, her agenda item. It just was too long. Is my communication the right length? And that includes an email, but that also includes a meeting. How long do we really need to meet here? When I get an invite from a teacher to meet for an hour, wow, that's a long time. So think about the length of that communication. Then am I giving the administrator enough time and enough lead information so they can prepare? This meeting is more effective if they know what we're going to talk about and they understand what my concerns might be or what it is I want to talk about so they can prep. I love it when I can prep for a meeting with the teachers so we can really dig in. I'm ready to go. I have the information I need. Otherwise, they just present to me and I have to say, great, thanks for this information. Give me time to process through and let's have a follow-up. And that's okay, but just to know that that might happen in your communications if you don't give your administrator some lead time. Some other key points, we talked about being student-centered. That piece about background knowledge, ask yourself what background knowledge about music does my administrator need? And you might find it's a lot, right? Because they don't have that same experience like we talked about earlier with James. If you have an administrator who's not into the arts and music and those types of things, giving them that right background. And then I always try to think about how does my communications, how do they fit with our strategic priorities as a building, as a school district, as a department? Administrators value those things. How do they align? When someone presents to me some ideas that don't align with what we're really focusing on as a school, I'm less likely to want to really dive down the rabbit hole with them because it's going, well, that's great, but you're not really aligning with our strategic priorities here as a school. Both some other things you want to share about this crafting effective communication?
No, it's all great. Christopher asked, will these slides be available later? Would you like me to post them in the chat or
Yeah.
how would you like to share these?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share these in the chat, and I'm sure KHS has some other ways to send these out, but we could absolutely share these in the chat. Bo, if you'd love to do that, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll throw a link in there.
And then just to finish up this one, just the idea of student-centered, like we talked about. Use data. Data is a great thing to have. How does my number one thing I'm always thinking about as administrator when someone comes to me, how does it support student learning and student growth? If you have something that supports student learning and student growth, and you can show that to me and prove it, I am way more likely to support your initiative or idea that you have. Show me how it affects student learning, because that's why we're here. That's why we do this work. And I'm going to jump on board, and I'm going to go right there with you and do all I can to support your idea or initiative, because you're talking about helping students learn and grow. That's what we're all about. And then that piece too, someone mentioned, I think earlier, that idea of getting others to look at your communication plan. Here's what I'm looking at. Here's the situation. Here's my communication plan. Take a look at it. What do you think? What kind of feedback do you have? And we'll go into a few other things here about creating effective communication. If you're ever into a thing called cognitive coaching, I suggest you check it out. It's a great way to learn about communication and a great way to learn about communicating with others. There are times you're going to coach your administrator a bit on music education because they don't have the knowledge you do. So check out a thing called cognitive coaching. And cognitive coaching talks a lot about pluralistic language. This idea that there's not just an option, there's options, plural. So when you're presenting ideas, present several options. And ask yourself, am I only communicating in absolutes? There's a thing called distorted thinking. We all do it. We all fall victim to it. If you're using words like never, always, have to, if you're using, I have this emotion and this emotion makes it fact. There's a whole thing called distorted thinking. Check it out and check yourself to see if you're using distorted thinking. There's a link there in this presentation that really helps you streamline your communication and pull away those types of things. Because distorted thinking, those absolutes, really turn people off to wanting to communicate with you. Is my style of voice credible or approachable? There are times we need to be credible, meaning they really tell me more about a band repair budget. I'm going to use a credible voice because I know about a band repair budget, and I want you to know that I know this. Approachable says, I'm open to different ideas. Let's communicate back and forth together. We use these voices as teachers all the time. So whether you know it or not or use those terms, you use credible voices with kids and you use approachable voices with kids often. Use those same types of voices when you're communicating with your administrator. Some other thoughts: be mindful of the role culture plays in communication. Culture does play a huge role, and be aware of that and be thinking about that. Be aware of how you present yourself non-verbally. Be aware of how your administrator presents themselves non-verbally. It's a thing called mirroring in body language. I suggest you learn about it, mirroring people's language. There's proven science that says when you mirror someone's body language, how they sit, and you mirror it, they are more likely to engage with you in conversation and actually follow along with you and agree with you. So mirroring body language can be a really great tool when you work with your administrator. Next point, use visuals. A third point can help tremendously. This slide deck is an example of a third point, something you can go to. So if you're working with students as well, my problem isn't with you, the student. It's this problem here on this piece of paper that we're going to work and we're going to talk about. So my problem isn't with you as an administrator. I care about you. I think you're a good person. I like you. But we're disagreeing on this third point, and we're going to talk about this. So it makes it feel less personal, and it brings it to the topic at hand. And it also helps guide the conversation because you can take notes as you go. And there's a great question about composure, and he brought up that idea of managing your emotions. Ask yourself, how am I going to manage my emotions? What are my triggers? My trigger is things that I view as injustice. If I view something as an injustice, it triggers me quickly and gets me angry. So I have to be mindful of that when I meet with people so that I don't lose my composure in those moments. And so that I'm really careful about monitoring my emotional intelligence, especially in challenging conversations. When we're having the dissonance, I want to be my best in moments that are the most challenging. And a question I ask myself every day is, what kind of person do I need to be today in this conversation? How do I need to present myself? And am I open to a solution that I haven't even thought of? I think most of the time we have two situations. here's my feeling on what it should be. Administrator has theirs. The reality is the solution is often in the middle. And let's work to find that middle, that hidden solution that we just haven't found, but we need to collaborate to get there. Bo, any thoughts?
You know what? I like that mirroring trick. It sounds like a Jedi mind trick. I'm going to use that next time I'm talking to my principal. So thank you for that. I think the idea behind not talking in absolutes is so important. We recently made a proposal to create an arts coordinator position in our district. We're the 4th largest district in the state. We definitely need it. And unfortunately, the committee decided we needed to kind of put our foot down and say it's all or nothing. We either need a position or nothing else. There's no middle ground. And I think looking back, we should have offered several options. You know, what about a teacher on special assignment? What about some type of coordinator stipend for people throughout the district? And I also think about when you're making capital outlay requests, maybe not putting the most expensive option as your only option, but can you put, here's option A, this is our first choice. Here's option B, it costs a little bit less, but it's still good. Here's option C, if we really don't have the money, this would also do the trick. Yes. I think having those options laid out and being honest with your administrator when making those decisions is important.
That's great. And as an administrator, what that tells me when you do that work ahead of times, it tells me that I can trust you, because I know that Bo is thorough and he's going to do his work. So when Bo speaks to me, I know he's coming to me with a really considered position. And I know that he can do what he says he's going to do. And I know that he will do what he says he can do, because that's what trust is, right? I can do what I'm saying I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to do it. And that's how you build trust. Think of what times you haven't had trust with your administrator. They don't do what they say they're going to do, right? They said he's going to do it. He didn't do it. He can't do what he says he's going to do. He doesn't have the skills to do the thing he says he's going to do for me. So think about that as you're working on that trust. Let's keep moving along. Some next steps. So you've had that initial communication. What's our plan moving forward? I find when I'm meeting with an administrator, whether we're communicating through email, in person, I'm meeting with teachers, I always want to know what's their plan moving forward. Action steps are so important because they hold everyone accountable. Who's doing what and when? What are our timelines? What are our next steps? Who's doing it? They help us move forward. If you leave a meeting without that, it's possible that all this great stuff you talked about will never happen. Great, so we're gonna establish this arts coordinator position. Wonderful, so what's the timeline on that? And so your step is you're gonna post the job, okay, and I'm gonna start working on interview questions for that. Great, so you start getting these action steps together so it moves forward. Otherwise, things can get lost and there's not follow through. And remember, follow through creates trust. Your ability to follow through builds trust, as does theirs. And let's go into this final piece, this closure and non-closure, which we talked a bit about from Ray's question. In your mind, what will closure look like on this topic? How will I know that this topic is closed? Have we agreed that we've closed this discussion? I had a colleague, he was a really great colleague and a great educator, but he was upset about staffing one year. And so he went to our assistant principal and talked about it and had a discussion. Administrator said staffing's staying the same. He came back 2 days later, had the same discussion. 2 days later, the same discussion. And eventually the administrator said, this topic is closed. We are closing this topic. Do not come here again. And that's an example of just not agreeing on whether or not this topic is closed, right? I presented this ideas, the administrator says, here's what we're doing, we're done now. And then if whatever we might have agreed on before, have we documented our agreements, right? Have we documented what we're doing here? We have a sense of what we're doing. This is why the third point helps. I wrote in the notes about visuals. Visuals help give us the things we're going to do. We have them documented. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we agreed upon. And like I brought up before, if we're going to table this conversation, can I bring it up again on a later date? What are some timelines where it might be okay for you as my administrator for me to come here again and talk about this discussion again? And then that piece again, like I talked about with Ray, what do we do if our decisions fall outside our value? In this situation, and more importantly, persistently, if we're having decisions that really fall outside my values, what am I going to do? And what are my next steps? And how am I going to feel about that? Bo, some thoughts you have?
I think you're spot on, Brian. Yeah, asking and just being honest with your administrator. When's a good time to bring this up again? And can we address this again a year from now when, maybe a similar decision is being made? That's great.
Yeah, so we're wrapping up with about 5 minutes left. This is just a review of things, and again, we'll share this out. I would love if there are more questions, or there are more thoughts. If there are things we haven't explored, like, hey, here's a question, or here's the situation I'm going, help me out, give me some ideas, give me some talking points. And that could be from Bo and I, and then all the great educators we have here in the chat can help you as well. So if you have some ideas or some questions, let's put them in there now, and let's see what we can do. See, Ray writes, knowing that administrators are incredibly busy with other matters, when would be a good time to speak to them about your concerns without seeming pushy? From my perspective, and Bo, I can give you a chance as well. You're right, we're busy, but so are you as educators. I know that for as busy as I am, I know Ray Vasquez is also super busy in his work because he's a passionate educator. So I'm happy to take any time to meet with you. To me, the good time is when you set up a meeting. And knowing, like, I'm always open door, but if we're about to talk about something that might be like a big topic or heavier, and they do a drop-in, I'll suggest, hey, let's find a time to meet. Send me some dates and times, or send me some calendar invites, and I'll pick some ones that work so we can give this conversation the time it needs, right? So we can honor the purpose of this conversation, the importance of this conversation. So I don't think it's a matter of being pushy. I think it's a matter about just giving them some lead time to really fit it into the schedule. And then just knowing that do we have that trust that when Ray comes to me, I know Ray's talking to me about something here that really matters, right? So doing your own sifting in your head. This is something I can let go of. I don't think I need to go to my administrator. Boy, this is something I've really slept on. I know Ryan McCarthy talked about that, of sleeping on it. And I really feel like I need to talk to my administrator about it. If nothing else, just to let him know what I'm thinking and feeling about this. Bo, what are your thoughts to Ray's question?
Yeah, Brian, and I want to tie back what you said earlier about just knowing how to communicate with each administrator, each individual. I have administrators that don't like to email and don't like to set up a meeting. I'll send them like, hey, can we meet about this? And they just say, come on down. That's it. And then I have some administrators that I know, yes, we need to talk to the secretary, set up a meeting, find a time that's mutually agreeable. So just knowing your administrator, knowing their preferred route and channel for communication is important.
Yep. And I'm kind of with you. I do like one-on-one meetings more than email. Sometimes people send me emails, and then my response is to send them a calendar invite. Like, great topic, let's meet on this. Because just the typing of it takes more time. And then we find ourselves just going back and forth when we spend 40 minutes on emails when we could have had a 20-minute conversation.
I'm going to jump in here, guys. I got to tell you, as a former elementary principal, Brian, as yourself, and a former band director for high school, middle school as Bo, this has been outstanding. I hope everybody has got a lot out of this. And Bo, thanks for sharing the slides, because there's so much great information in here. Want to let everybody else know too that we will have this video up on our website as well, so you can watch it again. I just see Tony White put a little nice note there. Anthony, how are you? Been a long time. He's at the LA Unified School District out in Los Angeles, which is a lot earlier in time right now. I do want to remind everybody, for next week, we will have another great presentation featuring another two great educators. We'll have Scott Brown and Mike Lynch with us doing Building a Strong Percussion Ensemble. Again, we offer these series free of charge. A professional development certificate is available. It'll be at the same time, 6 o'clock Central Time, and right into this same place. So once again, I would really like to thank both Bo and Brian for taking the time to not only share with us today, but you obviously put a lot of thought into this presentation, and which is very much appreciated. So again, I'll let you guys sign off. And to remind the educators that are here that we will have your certificate for your professional development hour sent probably within an hour after this. So go ahead, guys.
Great. Can I say real quick, Rick? Thanks to everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks to Bo. It's just a real pleasure to work with KHS. Really great place, and I really appreciate it. So thank you, everyone. And really, if you want to connect with us down the road, I know Bo's open to emails or communication. Please do. We'd love to connect and collaborate more with you. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Good luck with the rest of your school year, and as you start another one just around the corner.